Hello, and welcome to Slice of Wine, the podcast that gives you the snippets of people, places, and innovations behind the barrel. I'm your host, Aimee Cronin, and today I'm talking with Gayle Corrigan from Saperavi, USA, a Rhode Island wine importer specializing in wines from Georgia and from Ukraine. So, Gayle, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome to Slice of Wine. Um,
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I think we just need to cut to the chase here because in real time, one of your wineries is probably facing one of the most gut wrenching decisions a winery would have to make, being in Ukraine and being in the middle of a war, and having a winery that is now surrounded by Russians. Can you tell me a little bit about what's happening there and what the decision is that they have to make right now?
So yes, one of my Ukrainian supplier happens to be the largest, most well-known, and deepest winery in the world for sparkling wine. It's 236 feet underground. It's called Artwinery. It was actually created in 1950 by Stalin after the Soviets had their own sort of sanctions by France, and France was not sending champagne to the Soviet Union. So Art Winery was created to have this champagne quality, an aged champagne, all in that method traditionnel, all with that um, stable atmosphere. Everything that makes a great bottle of champagne is in this winery. And the winery is, like I said, 236 feet underground. And they have 50 million bottles, and that's 50 million bottles aging right now underground.
Yeah.
The town that the winery in is called Bakhmut, and it is right on the edge of, it is in the Donbass region, the Donetsk Oblast. And if you just take a current war map, you will see that the Russians are, as of yesterday, I haven't checked today, but as of yesterday, they were roughly about 5 miles away from the city of Bakhmut. Now, very interestingly, the Russians know that there's 50 million bottles of sparkling wine underground because Bakhmut has been bombed and shelled since May 17th, but there's almost like this little magic circle around the
Interesting.
Art Winery, and that has not been shelled. So their decision is, if Bakhmut falls to the Russians, do they leave these 50 million bottles to the Russians? And of course, the Russians want them because you can imagine right now the French aren't sending champagne to Moscow. The Italians aren't sending Prosecco. The Spanish aren't sending Cava. So these 50 million bottles, they're in great demand in Russia because
Yeah.
of the sanctions. And what I would say, leaning toward is that they would destroy the underground caves and the 50 million bottles.
Wow. So destroying 50 million bottles of aged sparkling wine, champagne method sparkling wine to keep it out of the hands of the Russians.
That's correct. That's the decision they're making.
Wow. And this is in real time, like every moment, every day.
Yep.
It's a question
Yeah.
if they
So
want to do
every
that.
day, yeah, every day. I think the war, to a lot of us, and how it happened, it was a little bit of a surprise. And for them, I would say the first
Hmm.
few weeks, they were in shock. So many of the people I work with live in Kiev, and there's about 1,000
Hmm.
people in Bakhmut who actually work in the winery because everything is done by hand. If you know anything about age or champagne method of making sparkling wine, it ages in the bottle. The second fermentation is actually in the bottle, and the yeast, or what they're called lees, are on the bottom of the bottle. And so, for instance, somebody's asked me, well, why can't they just move it all? And produce it and make bottles. And I said, well, they actually hand riddle, or just to be able to get the dead yeast out and to be able to create a proper bottle of sparkling wine, it would take at least 2 weeks. And they have, even though they have 1,000 people working there, because of the bombing, about 70% or 700 have been relocated to a safer place, and only about 300 people remain. So as of today, I understood that they are actually trying to move some of the bottles, and they would have to move them truckload at a time. A truckload is 10,000 bottles. So if you were trying to move all 50,000 bottles, 50 million bottles, you would need 50,000 truckloads.
And how do you get that out of a town that's being bombed by and surrounded by Russians?
Exactly.
I mean, it sounds like
So
that's
they've
a
promised
possibility.
us,
Like they're trying to get the wines out.
10,000 bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah, they promised us a truckload. So I'm assuming that they got at least one truckload out. But no matter what, this is a very, very precarious situation. And it's their bravery, their resistance is absolutely amazing during this time period. And they also, they need to survive. And so they have started up a cooperation with another winery to the east near the Odessa region, and they are trying to make a new product. They can't call it art wine because that is the product that is aged, that is sitting 50 million bottles in these caves, 236 feet underground. But we are actively working with them to come up with a new brand name, with a new brand, the story, all those kind of marketing elements to tell Americans about what's going on in this winery in Ukraine.
So I just I want to hear more about this new brand, and I mean, developing a brand with a team that is in the throes of war. Has got to be a very interesting experience. I mean, their perceptions of what a brand should be and what how this reflects them and their winery is probably different than what traditional marketing in the United States looks like. What has that been like, and how do they see this new brand? I mean, is this a war-torn brand? Is this, do they want it to reflect some of the struggles that they're going through?
Oh, absolutely. And so their marketing team gave us a set of slides with the idea, their brand ideas. And so I'll just give you an example. I started translating it, and I'm like, oh boy, because it's in Russian. And one of them, the translation was, it was about the Ukrainian soldier and how they were brave and courageous, but how they were sex symbols. And because in Ukraine, just kind of like when World War II, when we had Elvis go join the army, they actually have their local actors and actresses and famous celebrities. Some of them are actually become soldiers. And so when I started translating it, and it said, they are very sexy and everyone wants to marry them. And I was like, okay. And they wanted to come up with this brand about how Ukrainian soldiers, everybody wanted to marry. And I'm like, that might not translate very well here. And there's a lot of, yeah, I know. And there's a lot of, and they had some pictures.
I mean, soldiers are sexy,
Yeah, and they were sexy, but I'm not sure that's going to sell this new brand. And they had, there were some other things that were like, let me pause here because I just got to think about them. Okay, so there were some other symbols that are very well known in Ukraine, like their symbol of, it's actually a witch, and it's the protector, it's a woman protector, but the name of it, and the only translation, it's a folkloric hero, is a witch. And I'm like, well, that's not going to translate it. Witch wine? No. So things like that. And then they had, like, of course, they have, if some people who are listening to this might, if they keep paying a lot of attention, they had the largest transport carrier in the world, was destroyed on the Battle of Kiev when the Russians first came in, and the
Hmm.
name of this aircraft is called Dream, or Maria. It's also very difficult for Americans to say. And so this aircraft, this plane has become this sort of symbol of the war for Ukrainians. But many Americans would
Make that
not
connection.
recognize that.
Yeah.
So even though I've recognized it as a symbol because I've been paying a lot of attention,
Hmm.
most Americans would not. And so that was
Yeah.
their number one idea. So the one that we kind of fell toward, is the nightingale, and the nightingale, or what's called little bird. It's a common nightingale. We don't have them in America. They aren't here. But it's a very interesting bird because there's a very folkloric idea about it, where the bird would fly from India to its summer nesting grounds in the north and pass by Ukraine, and they saw that the Ukrainians were very sad. So the nightingales sang sweet songs to the Ukrainians and taught them how to sing. And then every year, the nightingale comes to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians sing happy songs when they see the nightingales. And the nightingales are also builders of homes. And given that the destruction that has
Hmm.
happened in Ukraine, we feel that the nightingale, or little bird, as a builder of homes, this is what is going to be needed no matter
Yeah.
what happens with this war. You're going to have to need this rebuilding.
Yep.
And the symbol of the nightingale is very, very beautiful. So that's where we're trying to move them, but again, it's their
Yep.
product, it's kind of their war,
Yeah.
and I'm waiting. Hopefully by next week we'll see what they're thinking. But we do have some input on the new product development in the American market.
Well, all three brands sound very real and true, and I do think the Nightingale sounds like it would resonate with the American market
Yeah.
as well.
Yes.
And the rebuilding is really, it's an important message, and it's a reflection of what really is, yeah, definitely going to need to happen. Going back to Art Winery, so 70% of the staff has left, right? But there's still 300
Yes.
people in this winery that's almost 300 feet underground. So the winery is protected from the bombing, if it were to hit it
Well, the
to a degree, or
the
like what are the
bottles
people
are.
doing? The
Yeah. So
bottles are.
the bottles are. I should let you finish. The bottles are protected because they're aging.
Mhm.
They're laying on their sides in the 326 feet in these underground caves. Some of the offices and the production facilities are also underground. So where they were going to, the bottling equipment, that's also
Yeah.
underground, and some offices are underground. But they do have above ground component in offices. So they do have buildings above ground, and these are places where before they would they bring the bottles up, that were already, and they would just put the labels on them. They would
Right.
package them into the cardboard boxes, and then they would palletize them for shipment around Ukraine or for export.
Hmm.
And so those offices, of course, they have moved people who are working underground. Some people do work from home. For some reason, the accountants, who in Ukraine tend to be women, they all decided to stay, and they're counting and giving
Wow.
reports about how many. Like, that's how they know they have 50 million bottles, and they're doing inventory reports. And also, for some reason, the lawyer, who is also a woman, decided to stay. So, and one of the things about them staying is that, in June, Bakhmut ran out of water and food. So Art Winery in in like many Ukrainian places under attack, like obviously food and water is scarce, and then finally actually just stops. And so Art Winery itself, as an entity, has been sending trucks of food and water to Bakhmut for the people who have decided to stay there.
Wow.
But I believe that in the last week or two, they're really trying, and I think even President Zelensky is really trying to move people away from Bakhmut and encouraging people to leave. Of course, there are those that this is their home. These are the older folks, and so
Yeah.
Art Winery is committed to continue this humanitarian aid to Bakhmut from Kiev and other places. So I think this decision of the Russians coming and what are they going to do with the 50 million bottles,
Yeah.
it's going to happen relatively soon.
I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before, but my company, Coverlead, we also work with a lot of Ukrainian teams, and I've seen from our side, one of our teams, cities just got bombed, and it's just it's very telling of the people. That they continue on. Our team's continuing on. Obviously, the Art Winery team is, they're not stopping. They're finding solutions. They're moving on, and
Yes.
hopefully, this is going to be a story of perseverance. I'd love to have you back on the show, and talk a little more. Once we sort of know where they had to land, and how things are going. It is nice to hear that. If they're able to get some cases out, you'll be able to bring that to the United States, and share that with give a
Yeah, and
American.
we do have wine in our inventory, art wine in our inventory. So
Mhm.
what we're looking at right now is how best to distribute this wine in a way that will assist Art Winery and its employees, because it is very limited quantities. Some of it we have that it's not available anywhere else in the world, even in Art Winery and themselves. We bought the last of a certain product. So that's the kind of thing we're working on to
Mhm.
raise awareness for Art Winery and raise money so that we can, one, help Art Winery in its efforts to help their humanitarian efforts for the
Yep.
city of Bakhmut, but also their new efforts to set up a production facility on the other side of the country, and getting these new products and for Americans to be aware of them. And by the way, they taste great. Like, this is amazing sparkling wine, and so I'm really looking forward to the new, hopefully, Little Bird,
Yeah.
Little Bird brand of sparkling wine, because their winemakers are just fantastic in their taste. So this
Yeah.
is a great product that Americans need to know about.
And I can corroborate that because we had a tasting of the entire portfolio prior to this, and it is hands down a really really great product, and you can see the quality through and through, in it. So, thank you so much, Gail, for joining the
Oh,
show,
you're welcome.
and we look forward to updates.